to the 10% tithe. That's, I think, maybe that was part. I don't know if Pastor Christy talked about that or not, but thanks, Diana. I mean, somebody was helping me. Excited to be here, bringing the word today. Pilate. We're continuing the series. I was raised Catholic, so Lent was just kind of embedded in me. I love Lent. Lent helps Easter not blitz by. Lent helps giving things and a process and a journey that, again, it doesn't just let Jesus on a cross slip by. Jesus in the manger seems to always stay big, but Jesus on the cross, it seems like culturally gets pushed aside. So the heart of the series, as Pastor Christy planned it, was just focusing on Pilate and really thinking about his role, which ultimately comes down to the trials of Jesus. 6 trials that Jesus faced that led to his crucifixion and the role that Pontius Pilate played in that. Couple quotes as we dive in. First one says this: the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men and women to do nothing. Yeah, no, you even react more than that. I say, I'm going to read it again and try again. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men and women to do nothing. Yeah. How about this one? Albert Einstein. The world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing. Yeah. Deeply concerning. It sounds like when you're shooting video and you need sound effects of a crowd, you just hit that button. Maybe not. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm still getting dialed in here. That was amazing worship, amazing prayer. We're getting close. Yeah, so the cost of being neutral. Think of that title with that quote, the cost of being neutral. If we don't do good in the face of evil, that is a horrible thing. That's not just like, it's not neutral. It's horrible. It's at the heart of what we're talking about today, because ultimately Pilate's journey is a journey of trying to play neutral, actually having the inclination and having the information, having the knowledge that what is happening is wrong and is like dead wrong, is horribly wrong, but does not find it within himself to have the courage to stop it. He finds and plays a game a lot like Pastor Christy talked about last week, the games that we play, and oh man, do we play games. But today I think Pilate exposes some of that of how we can play games, and we think we're neutral, but we are not neutral. I think looking at how Pilate acts in this time, how Pilate handles and is handling Jesus and his trials, should actually be in us a call to biblical justice, that we would stand up, that we would have a voice, that we wouldn't move away, that ourself and what happens to us, if we act and if we move and if we say something, that's not our first thought, that we're willing to pay a cost, do the math, find out what it's going to cost us, but stand for what is right and good for like our brother. Some vocab words that are pretty important. Relatively new. I've known of these words, you know of these words, but to think of like entering and letting them enter into your story and think about how you follow Jesus and how this neutral game might be playing out in our lives and what this call to biblical justice and what a response looks like could be crazy. Silence, accommodation, and complicity. Think about those words. Here's some quick definitions of them. Silence is the failure to speak. You know wrong is happening. You have a voice and a platform, but you say nothing. That's horrible. I've done bad and wrong things in my life. But I think if I slow down and I think about times like this, that I had the chance to do something, to speak up, to say something in the protection of a brother or a sister or a child or a friend, and I was silent, that's despicable. And we can be that if we are not careful. Accommodating is the failure to act right. And instead we act in a compromising, bending way. We don't exactly agree with what's happening. Even the exactly word starts to, I don't exactly agree with what's taking place. So that somehow gives us a pass to have a voice. And therefore we do something different. We adjust behavior. We bend our action. We find workarounds to avoid the conflict often and the discomfort. I'm a middle child. I wish I was a peacemaker, but far too often I'm a peacekeeper. You know the difference? Accommodation is the difference. And that is a problem. And then ending up complicit. We do not stop the wrongdoing. And we claim neutral, but you are not. We are guilty of what just took place. We were a part of that story and that action as it unfolded. We aren't neutral when we think we are. We're actually silent, and we're accommodating, and we're complicit in the evil that is happening. I think it's important, and it's evident in our passage today and looking at Pilate, because Jesus and what he was all about, and actually Jesus and what he was actually going through these trials, was the stripping of dignity, of his identity, and of his purpose. And ultimately, evil, sometimes we think of horror movies, we think of scary things are like evil, and Satan just as this separate being who horns and pitchfork, and that's evil. But like, what is evil about Satan is he's after the human dignity that every one of us has. Everyone who God has created and is a child of God, which is everyone, whether they recognize it or not, in this world, Satan is after their dignity, their identity, and their purpose, and he is ultimately stripping that from us. And things that have happened to you and that you've done, and things that you've been tempted by Satan to do and to take part in, and things you've been tempted by Satan to not do and to fade away from and fail to act on. Those are all like after who you are and how you are. And that is evil. And as we start to think of our brothers and sisters and what's taking place in this world and our friends and our family members, as we think of the elderly, as we think of children, man, anywhere that dignity is being stripped and identity is being broken and purpose is being inhibited from someone having the access and the opportunity to be who and how God has made them to be, that's evil. And to not speak into that would be horrible. And all it takes is one good person around that to watch it and think they don't have to say something, do something, get involved, sacrifice something, do something that's going to cost them something to lead them to inaction, and then evil's prevailing. And I think it's important, too, that as we think about individuals and people groups within this, and think of dignity, identity, and purpose, that to know Jesus and to know the heart of Jesus and who he was while he was on trial, it is got to be at the center of our screen are the poor and the vulnerable and the marginalized. Those are the ones that are hurting. That's where dignity and identity and the God-given purpose, that's who that is being stripped away from most, is the poor and the marginalized, the broken. That should be what is, we're always on the lookout for where are the poor, the vulnerable, and the marginalized in any room. And how do we act towards them for dignity and their identity and their true given purpose? That's doing good in the face of evil. And that's exactly what Pilate is not willing to do in the face of the evil that Jesus is going through as he's stripped of dignity, identity, and purpose, as he becomes poor and vulnerable and marginalized, and he just claims quietness. It's been a great couple weeks already with Pilate and seeing the games that we play and being challenged by that. But what was really helpful to me this week is looking at some maps, because of all these encounters and these trials, and where's that all taking place? It gets pretty scrambled and pretty confusing. But I found some maps that really helped out, and I also found a cat toy. There it is. You want to entertain me for at least 45 minutes? Give me one of these bad boys, and I'm set. But it was for this purpose. So this just helped me. This just helped me a lot. Here is the upper room. I never really thought, I know of the upper room. I know it's the hideaway of the disciples. A lot of Jesus and the time with the disciples happens here. This is where it is in Jerusalem. This is the city of Jerusalem. And actually, all these trials are taking place within here. And I don't know why, but I thought it wasn't. I thought there was a bigger geography that it was all covering, but it's really just this. Some scope of the geography is, here's Division, here's Madison. That's about a half mile. Division, Madison. Here's Wealthy, and here's Hall Street. That really is that's almost like a 2-block area, bigger city blocks, but that's kind of where that is, that this is all happening. And it all starts Thursday night in the upper room where Jesus is gathered with the disciples for Passover and the Last Supper, him eating and having that time with them before they go out and about over to the Mount of Olives, another teaching space that Jesus regularly hangs out in with his disciples, but they specifically go to the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus invites Peter, James, and John, especially Peter, Paul, and Mary. What? Yeah, so we're dealing with that too up here. That's in here. So Mount of Olives, the Garden of Gethsemane, where he's praying and shedding blood through his prayer for unity, for not his will, but God's to be done. All that's where that was happening. Some maps have actually shown they took this temple court route and went through here to get there, but this one had evidence that made more sense showing it out here. The Judas in the temple and the betraying, maybe Judas took a shortcut, did his deal, did his dirty, and then showed up or sent out for the arrest of Jesus. That was all on Thursday night, and then through the night, coming back facing trial with Annas, the first religious trial that he was put on. His house was somewhere in this location. Then over to Caiaphas, his house. Annas passed it on to Caiaphas, who then passes it on to the Sanhedrin, who moves over here. So we're upper room, Garden of Gethsemane, back through first religious trial, second religious trial, third religious before the Sanhedrin, before they decide to send him to Pilate. Pilate's over here in the palace. Herod has another place where Herod actually is, but this is where the religious leaders, after finding him guilty of blasphemy, bring him here to order the death sentence. And then that's where Pilate engages him for the first time, but knows about everything going on, knows the story, has had many interactions with the religious leaders, doesn't buy their story, doesn't buy into what they have. They're a big pain in his side, in butt, in his position, in his power, all of those things. And then Pilate doesn't want to deal with it, so Herod's actually over here in another dwelling or palace type thing of his house, and they end up passing back and forth Pilate to delay, to try to remain neutral. Comes to Herod. Herod passes back. And it's actually, the best thing I was reading about this or saw about it was the crowd was probably out here. Pilate's in here going back and forth. Like, here's where he's finding the solitude of, like, what in the world's going on? How in the world am I going to get out of this? Out here he's before the crowd and trying to cut a deal and get Jesus out of it and get the innocent man off the hook of what everybody is demanding and is wanting. And then finally from there is taken to one thought is here is where the cross was, one thought is here is where the cross was, that he then goes to the cross. After best night ever, into the story and through the trials, being innocent the entire time, but becoming beaten and broken and stripped of dignity and identity and the vulnerability and marginalized by everyone and pushed to the side and down until the cross hits him. And Pilate couldn't stand up in that at all. Three things through those trials that are really creating these sources of injustice. Like, why is that happening? And they happen to us. These same sources of injustice, or these pockets where injustice can play out, if we are not careful, if we do not say something, if we do not take action, we fall into the same silence and accommodation and end up complicit just as much as Pilate. The three are ultimately toxic religion, and you can smell that and see that through the religious trials, what Pilate knows happening and going on before this. It's through the political power and the holding on of position and self-interest related to that. That is not different than the toxic religion. It's the same thing, flesh and self and preservation and power and position and what I have, and I need to have it, and me at the center of it all. And the third one then is the pressure of the crowd. In each of those geographies, there's a different thing. In each of those trials, there's a different injustice being exploited that's playing out. So our text today, we're just doing some snapshots through those scenarios that are kind of unpacking that and revealing that about that must be what's going on in Pilate, is this ultimate goal to remain neutral, but neutral doesn't count. For toxic religion, Luke 23 verses 1 and 2 say this: when the whole assembly rose and led him off to Pilate. So jump back to the map. That is the Sanhedrin spot. They've already gone through Annas and into Caiaphas. They're now over here, and they've decided that and have declared the verdict that he is blasphemous and must die. They don't have the guts to kill him, so they're sending him then to Pilate. The whole assembly rose and led him there over to the palace, and they began to accuse him, saying, "We have found him, this man, subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be Messiah, which is a king." What the further study on this knows is they're changing their story. They're changing their why to make it fit the situation so that Pilate will kill him, even though that they know he's innocent to Roman law. He's guilty of blasphemy according to the religious law, but to the government and to Rome, that they know Jesus claiming to be God does not, Pilate doesn't care about that. So the religious twist that is going on is they're saying Jesus is something that he's not. They're misrepresenting who he is. They're misrepresenting his story. They're misrepresenting his kingdom. And they're playing a game. The religious leaders arrive with a verdict already prepared. Pilate sees through their motives. He knows it's the same thing within him that's driving them. They're worried about their position and their power, what they have and how they want to hold on to it, and they don't care and aren't willing to do the right thing. He keeps saying Jesus is innocent, but he never takes the stand. And even like this all happens where he's outside of the palace, because the Sanhedrin won't go into the palace because then they would be filthy according to their law. That's so hypocritical. What a bunch of hypocrites. Because like what they're doing is so vain and evil, and yet they're trying to keep this outward appearance of being clean and being holy. And that's like when the table turns and can spin right on us, because we're no different. We're no less guilty of toxic religion when we play that same kind of game, where we appear to be different and play a different story out, in our life, and when we're visible, than with what like our real motive is in our heart and what we're really trying to protect. That sets the real boundaries in our lives of who we love and how we love and to what degree do we love. So through this, we're seeing silence from Pilate, because Pilate knew the charges were motivated by envy and jealousy and pride and self-consumption. Yet never publicly would he name that. He just tried to work a way around it through accommodation. Rather than dismiss the charges, he went through the full trial, legitimizing the leaders' corrupt demands. They were their demands. He used that as like a distance to step back just a touch from. Then he ends up complicit. He handed Jesus over to be crucified at the religious leaders' demand, making their agenda his verdict. It's their agenda. I'm just stepping away from it and doing what they want. It's not me, it's them. That doesn't cut it. That's toxic religion. And that is evil. And that is an injustice in our world. When religion misrepresents Jesus, we've got to call that out. When Christians are like living some other story that has nothing to do with the Jesus of like the Bible, who loves the poor, vulnerable, the marginalized in this world, that is so against power that he tips it upside down all the time. First, last, least, most. Weakness, strong, all these things that don't go with their world and is costing it. We speak up against that kind of stuff when it's not. The prosperity gospel is an easy one. Of what? No, that's not Jesus. That's not what he calls us to. Follow him and it goes immensely better in your life and you'll prosper greatly in things of this world and wealth. Or today, it's the Christian nationalism. That is so toxic. It's like we're putting a flag around Jesus as he's going to the cross, and we're using this blend of Jesus in the United States and our country and our patriotism that just puts it in a blender and makes it all just one thing. It's all the same. And it's political and it's our party, but it's just draped in Jesus, like glitter maybe over it or something. No, that's horrible. That is horrible. Jesus sits so far apart from that. Silence is not neutral. Accommodating and distancing yourself from that conversation and not knowing enough about the conversation to have the conversation and work your way out, maybe that's neutral, but it's also silent, accommodating, and complicit with the misrepresenting of Jesus. So toxic religion, that's a problem. And seriously, I always say, I'm usually talking at the edge of my vocabulary. I use words that I'm not sure if I can fully say, and I say them and stuff. This message and this is just my whole discipleship journey and where I'm at. This is like the front edge. This thought and this need in our world and in our world today, and it's something I'm learning so much about and need to learn so much about. And that's the invitation, to commit to biblical justice, and we got to get better at that, but that's a learning journey about Jesus ultimately, so that justice can roll in this world as we represent him and his love and his life and his mercy and his kingdom in this world with power. Secondly, political power then. Toxic religion and then political power. And that's when the Sanhedrin then brings, let's see it again. From here to here. And it's kind of, again, Pilate was watching, in a sense, what was happening all throughout here. He knew what was going on, but now it's coming before the political power from the haven of toxic religion, rearing its face to there is where we are geographically. Luke 23, 6 and 7 says this: when Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. And when he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him off to Herod. who was himself in Jerusalem conveniently at that time. That's why I think there was just that other dwelling right over here, if you could still see the map. John 19:12 says, from then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free. He did get a little more vocal, but the Jewish leaders kept shouting, if you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. You will lose your seat, dude. Like where you sleep, that will not be it anymore if you are alive and not killed. This dude is no friend of Caesar, I remind you. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar. And those are the exact words the religious leaders spun into the story that says he's the Messiah. He thinks he's a king who could topple Caesar. That was not in Jesus' interest or thought at all. But all that spinning, and it's usable for Pilate's advantage, and it reminds him of this, oh yeah, so he pipes it down, steps back a little bit more, and sees if there's another way to work this out. The Galilean information means it's not just where Pilate rules, but it also Herod has voice over this. Let's see if we can pass this to Herod, make him make the decision. That would be awesome because I can be neutral. It will be on him. Doesn't work. He gets passed back from Herod to Pilate. That's a political game Herod's playing. Again, Pastor Christy last week in the games that we play, this passing off and just letting it go by, slide by, see if someone else would step up. Doesn't work. Pilate tries to pass the buck, sends Jesus to Herod. Herod and Pilate become friends through this shared avoidance. They figure out maybe we can navigate these waters together and we can all keep our places. The threat, no friend to Caesar, that's career, that's status, that's safety. And that's tough. That's going against his wife's own advice. Pilate, right? Matthew 27:19, Pilate's wife says, we should not have anything to do with this. This man is innocent. Doesn't say it in the text, but you get a sense from his behavior and his unwillingness to accuse him and to handle it with courage and boldly that he knew that. He knew there was innocence. He knew Jesus did nothing to die for. Convictions yielded to career, conscience yields to comfort, and that brings it home to us. Because we do a lot of things with Jesus and play a lot of distance games with Jesus when it comes to our real convictions and how strongly do we stand on those and fight for them or voice them. Conscience yields to comfort. Like, I so know that is wrong, but I'm good. This is my remote. Right? Silence. Pilate stayed silent because Jesus' innocence, because of his innocence when threatened. This no friend of Caesar thing, about the time he maybe was ready to speak up, that was mentioned, he pulled back and was silent. Accommodation, he sent Jesus to Herod to avoid making the call, arranging the system to protect himself. We use systems to protect ourselves a lot. Complicit, his final act was as a Roman governor was this order. He used state power to execute an innocent man. That happened. Our position, our income, our status must not silence our convictions. And not about us, but in the thought of not acting for others, not acting for the poor, not acting for the broken, those having dignity stripped from them for probably some systemic reason that people or those people sit different with a different starting line than everybody else. Lastly then, the pass back didn't work. He ends up with Jesus before the crowd, and this is where he gets most direct in trying to cut a deal is in the center, the pressure of the crowd. Matthew 27:21-23. Which of the two do you want me to release to you? Here's a way out. I've got this card that I can play, says Pilate, to the crowd and to himself. They can let somebody off that's sentenced to death. Maybe I will give them that option. So he asked, and they said, Barabbas. What shall I do then with Jesus, who is called the Messiah? Pilate asked. They all answered, crucify him. He says, why? Why in the world would you have me do that? What crime has he committed? Asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, crucify him. And the volume of the crowd got louder. It was one thing with the religious leaders in closed doors and in a small place. It was another thing with this exchange of Herod and him in the palace and in wherever outbuilding that Herod was in. But now it's the crowd, and the crowd creates the ruckus, and the roar grows every time. There's incremental compromise happening by Pilate. He first offers Barabbas in exchange. They say no. He says, all right, well, I'll flog him and then release him. I will punish him, but again, don't make me kill him, or I don't see him dying for this. I will beat him and then release him. They say no. And then it's a scourging. If we scourge him instead of just flogging him, will you take that and let him live? And they say, no way. Crucify him. And it's this building cultural pressure that Pilate was feeling, that we feel cultural pressure. In this room, to say something bold and courageous about Jesus in his life that may not be popular, every one of us has to quick do math of who's that going to be cool with and who's that not going to be cool with and who's that going to make mad and how mad are they going to get, and that's going to then be determining whether I say that or not. That can be your dinner table. That could be the water cooler at work. That could be your lunchroom at school. Where does the cultural pressure of saying nothing to just stop a ruckus or stop the roar? And actually, that shouldn't even be our motive, right? It should be to do the right thing. It's just driven to do the right thing. Act justly because you love mercy. And we walk humbly as we do it, but that's our call. From Pilate's trials, we should see that this is a call to us for biblical justice, to stand for that. Silence in this crowd scenario for Pilate he was asked why, what has he done? Again, still believing he's innocent, but falls silent, accommodates by offering the flogging and then Barabbas and then the scourging. And complicit, he thinks he can claim neutral by the hand washing and just step away from it. Pilate's character, his thoughts, and his actions, or his lack thereof, should call us to biblical justice. To see what he did to Jesus is what we're doing when we act in the same way of truth and following Jesus and being the kind of follower that is about the Jesus of the Bible. Pilate's thoughts and actions and character call us to biblical justice. The greatest thing we could do with the lessons from Pilate in his life is pursue biblical justice. The opposite of neutral is justice. That is what you have to do, or we're letting evil unravel. We're letting evil overflow. Not justice, which is what is supposed to be what rolls. This is a call to biblical justice. Here are some peppering of 5 verses that call us to this. Micah 6:8. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? What does he want from us? What is the best for us in our life? It's to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. To act justly, that means have voice, take a stand, defend the weak, advocate for the poor. Isaiah 1:17. Learn to do right then. Again, this is not easy. This is, unfortunately, it's advanced Christ following. It should be normal, but we got to learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow. My hard weeks have nothing to do with any of that, and that's pathetic. I have situational circumstance that becomes difficult, or I'm tired. It ought to be burdened because of working so hard to do right and seek justice and defend oppressed and the fatherless and the widow. We're called to that. Amos 5:24. But let justice roll like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. That's how this is supposed to look. Brother and sister, one another, acting toward, advocating for your dignity. Stand up. Don't be treated like that. That's so wrong. Where did that come from? Let's go fix that. Let's find how to bring reconciliation to that brokenness. Why wouldn't we? Psalm 82:3. Give justice to the weak and to the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Give yourself fully to that, whatever it costs you. Matthew 23:23. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, for you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law. You don't even know what this is about. Justice and mercy and faithfulness. That is what this is about. The call to biblical justice, but what does that look like? This is the front edge for many of us, of walking into a new set of woods. That's going to be awesome to explore, but we don't know a lot about it. We got to start figuring out, get a map of what that looks like. This is a decent map. It's a call to commitment to biblical justice in this day. Theologian, writer, activist Jim Wallace, founder originally of the Sojourners organization, now oversees a center of faith and justice at Georgetown University, and is an ecumenical leader, bringing the church and the voice together on a global and national platform. That what a commitment to biblical justice looks like is something like this. This is a commitment that has been put out because of the day that we're in, and a call to justice for us to just deeply consider. Again, maybe let be a map that we want to learn about the woods we could go into. And again, a part of city life, this is just inherent in who we are and what we do. We do justice. We do Jesus and justice in this place. And I think you'll catch that through much of this, and much of the action is just get a little more involved here. Get a little more involved with the neighborhood ministries. Get a little more involved with Monarch. Get a little bit more involved with the shower outreach. Other ministries that we have going on. But here's what it sounds like. 8 things. I'll try to crank through them. Jim Wallace says, he wrote this at the start. In this moment, we believe the Holy Spirit is moving us to stand, speak, and act with greater courage to serve the most vulnerable and advance God's reign of justice and peace. That's we, the church. That's those claiming to follow Christ today in our world. Therefore, we commit to, number 1, protect and stand with vulnerable people. We will defend immigrants, refugees, people of color, and all who are in harm's way. We will resist cruel and unjust and illegal policies and violent enforcement, and surround those under attack with pastoral care, solidarity, and a prophetic public witness. We will be in that space. Number 2, we'll love our neighbors. In obedience to Jesus, we will love our neighbors without exception, especially those who are different from us. and reflect the politics of fear and exclusion and dehumanization. We will reject the language of others and us and them and that mentality, and remember that Jesus came so that we all would be one. Speak the truth to power is number 3. We will confront lies and hatred towards immigrants, people of color, Jews, Muslims, and other religious minorities and political opponents. Oppose the rollback of civil rights and racial justice protections. Name racism as a sin from which we must repent and turn from, and resist the erasing of a false history and truth. Silence in this moment is complicity. Number 4 is to seek peace. We commit to persistently building peace and pursuing justice, including by acting nonviolently to protect those threatened by violence and advocating for a foreign policy that favors diplomacy, respects national sovereignty, and supports democracy, human rights, humanitarian aid, and peace building. Number 5, we will do justice. Guided by the prophets, we will challenge unjust laws, defend poor and marginalized people, and persist in the work of uprooting racism and white Christian nationalism. We will commit to act justly, love kindness, and walk humbly with God. Number 6, strengthen democracy. Honoring the image of God, the Imago Dei, in every person. In a democracy, that means each person's vote is their voice. We will therefore defend the right to vote, resist voter suppression and intimidation, encourage greater participation in our democratic process, and equip clergy and lay leaders to support free and fair elections. We will defend constitutional rights and freedoms, including speech and assembly, due process, the rule of law, and religious liberty, and will uphold democratic norms and practices because of Jesus. Number 7, the practice of hope. In a time of fear, intimidation, and despair, we will choose hope, which is more than optimism. It is trusting and believing that God is still at work. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And lastly, number 8, super important. This is grounded in our discipleship, knowing that following Jesus in this time requires deep well springs of spiritual courage. We will be rooted and grounded in prayer and love, developing practices and commitments to nurture resilience in our inward journey for the outward witness we embrace as our calling and as our commitment. The quote we started with, one of those, if I were to rewrite it for this moment and in the message, it would be like this: the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for Christ's followers to be neutral in the face of the injustices of our day. That would be horrible. We need to speak up. We need to act. We need to organize. We need to learn. We need to get mentors, other voices close to us to make the kingdom difference that is needed in our world. This is all about our vision around here of manifesting the kingdom. That's what this looks like. Jesus died for our sin, but it was injustice that killed him. We need to be a holy people, pursuing personal holiness and social holiness. That is social justice. That is biblical justice in our world today. Let's close in prayer together. Father God, we just cry out to you for you to lead us, you to guide us, you to convict us where your Holy Spirit sees the possibility and the need for change in our lives. May we hear your voice. May we hear your promptings. And I just pray, for an upwelling of the courage, that we would be bold and courageous in our faith to love you better and to love our neighbor better and to be a voice as you call us. So we just thank you. We thank you for your word. Continue to prepare us in this Lenten season and this preparation for Easter, that we, again, just may want to be different, may want to be changed. Help us desire that, and we ask that you do it. In Jesus' name, amen.